Ars Magica was first published in the 80s. The current edition, the fifth one, dates from 2004, but the game is still very much alive. The main reason for this is that the game, even back then, introduced new mechanics, unique mechanics, which are still relevant today. What is Ars Magica? It's a game where you play mages and other characters in a mythic Europe. A Europe grounded in medieval history in the 13th century, but also a Europe where there are demons, angels, fairies. This mythic Europe reminds me of another more recent game, Vaesen by Free League Publishing. Vaesen takes place in the mythic north, a version of Scandinavia with mythical creatures, but Vaesen is set in the 19th century. Besides the historical aspect, another fundamental part of Ars Magica is that you're invited to play as a troupe. Players may play a mage, but they will also rotate and play companions, and the role of game master is also meant to change between sessions. This rotation is interesting because a player will play characters of different power levels. It also makes sense because a magus spends many months, many years in his lab and not on quests. Who are these other characters you will play? Well, they're all members of the Covenant. A Covenant is a location where a small group of magi settle for some time to share resources and hire servants. You will create the Covenant as a group, and it will play an integral part in your campaign. The third main aspect of this game is that you are in it for the long run, the player and the characters. Magus can live for a long time, and a great part of the game is all the lab work that your magus will do between adventures. You can translate books to help the others in the Covenant. You can create magical items and train each other, and also create potions to ensure your longevity. In addition to covenants, there's a society for these magi. They are divided in houses, so it can lead to interesting political stories. Of course, another fundamental aspect is the mechanics for magic. There are tons of spells presented, but there are also rules for you to create your own spells, whether in the lab or you can also create spontaneous magic in the field. There's no limit to what you can do. You combine a technique like creation with a form like fire, and there are guidelines to calculate the level of any effect you might think of. The downside of this complex and rich system is that it's quite heavy. It's difficult to learn everything. There's a ton of formulas. Just looking at the character sheet or sheets, you see that there's a lot of information to track. Fortunately, you can use the formulas to calculate your various scores at the beginning of a campaign, making it pretty manageable afterwards. I would not recommend Ars Magica to people just coming into the role-playing hobby. It's a game that requires a great deal of investment. You need to find players willing to learn the mechanics, but also to seek to develop stories for their characters over the long term. The Covenant becomes a character in itself, and all the lab work will become interesting if all the players really want to see the Covenant improve over decades. It's also great if players are fans of history. It makes the world and the characters more tangible. And so if you find such a group, Ars Magica can become one of the most rewarding games out there.